So I'm actually from Texas. It's a little colder here. It's been a long journey, but it's been wonderful. Really nice people. Love this place. I've been having a really good time. So we're going to talk about tracking the metrics that matter most, particularly related to SaaS. I'm a B2B SaaS growth consultant. How many of you guys, just a show of hands, are an owner or a part of a SaaS business? All right. How many of you maybe are not, but are interested in being a part of a SaaS business? Okay. So for anyone that didn't raise their hands, you can leave. No. This is actually very applicable still. You can actually use this framework in any business, and it will work really well, just with some minor tweaks. Today, we're going to be talking mainly on the SaaS model, though. Over 16 years in working with hundreds of different companies, we've looked at the complexities of growing a SaaS business, and we're able to kind of break this down into 5 stages that we call actionable metrics. So today we're going to define your product or your company's actionable metrics and align your team around these metrics that matter most for growing your business so you can grow smarter and faster. So who is this for, other than everyone that raised their hands? This is great for startups, really gets you focused, but it's really good for any size business as well. Owners, managers, leadership team, it will give you really clear goals to align your team for growing around these particular metrics. If you're a team member and you feel like you're in an environment that's a little siloed with communication or maybe discombobulated and it's frustrating, you don't see the overall growth picture and how you're adding growth to your company, maybe take this framework to your boss and say, let's get aligned here. So this initial inspiration came from Dave McClure, who is the founder of 500 Startups. And basically, I think he was the CEO as well till 2017 or so. And this is an old video. This is like 2007 or something. And I would highly recommend checking this out. Just look up Startup Metrics for Pirates. It's a short video, 5 minutes maybe. And what we took is there's a lot of changes that we did. We rearranged metrics. We've changed different things. We've actually changed the purpose of this. So it's really not related anymore. However, I needed to give a shout out. All right, so let's get started. So we're going to talk about what actionable metrics are first. Then we'll define your product's actionable metrics, your company's. One thing to note here that's really important with actionable metrics is these are metrics specific to your company. So when you think of traditional KPIs or metrics, they're kind of generic and you're trying to fit your company into these metrics. These are very specific to your particular company, and this is why it's very important for you to get these right. Next, we'll align your team around these metrics, track your progress, and then I talk about identifying growth opportunities. So what are actionable metrics? These are the most important actions your user takes in your product that lead them to have success. So there's 5. Acquisition, how do users find you? Activation, do they have a great first experience? Revenue, how do you make money? Retention, do they come back to you? And referral, are they talking about you to others? So the graph on my left, your right, represents the first 3 are actually, they create a funnel. So acquisition, activation, and revenue, you can actually format these into a funnel and follow them through the customer journey, whereas retention and referral are really ongoing efforts that contribute to the bottom line, but they are ongoing. So don't necessarily look at these at the bottom 2 as a part of this funnel, just something to note here. And then under each of these, they kind of mention the goal, the primary goal of each of these actionable metrics, which we'll get into as well. So defining your product's actionable metrics, we break this down into two parts, primary metrics and secondary metrics. Primary being the most important metrics for that particular stage. The secondary metrics are the additional metrics that really assist in conversion for those primary metrics. So we look at these in each of the 5 stages and just denote, okay, we have primary and secondary in each of these, and we'll break them down. In order to explain this, I need a company. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to do this with everyone's individual companies, so we'll use Hotjar. Hotjar, hopefully you've heard of before, actually, I believe started as a heat map tool. I know it also does recordings and surveys and forms and all kinds of other things now. But we'll use Hotjar, heat maps in particular, to just explain and walk through actionable metrics. First metric is acquisition. Probably the most of you are most familiar with this metric. The top of the funnel type metrics where visitors find you online and initiate sign up before they really start exploring your solution. For SaaS businesses, your primary metric is going to be centered around your customer acquisition model. So your free trial, your free sign up, your demo. For Hotjar, I put in here a free trial. Your secondary metrics are the other actions that will lead up to converting on the primary acquisition metric. So here we have visits, and we like to bucket something called sign up intent, where maybe you have a pricing page or the action of starting the registration form for free trial, and look at those as a single metric called sign up intent. And then you may have others like download a resource, subscribe to a blog. The point is you want to keep this as simple as possible, and the goal being to agree as a team what these metrics are that matter most to track, and don't get too granular to start. Next, we talk about activation. This is the most difficult to define. This is basically the process in which you try to get them to achieve their aha moment or deliver on the promise of your business or time to first value. There's a million ways to talk about it. Whatever you want to define, I look at it as the user onboarding process and the completion of user onboarding or customer onboarding. There's some minute definitions in there that differ as well. When I'm looking at defining these, I like to look at the user onboarding process and map everything out. All right, so what's the top? Let's work through the middle. Let's get to the bottom. And then from there, pull out the core metrics that will actually create a funnel that every user has to take. So they cannot be skipped. Once you have those pulled out, and here, as the example, is create an account, install embed code, and create a heat map, then you can actually take all the metrics that are in between all of those, move them as secondary metrics, and they contribute to reaching the goals of those primary activation metrics. So in here we have test embed code is installed. It might help you install the embed code, or maybe you preview how a heat map works before you actually create a heat map, just as an example. So revenue, this is where you make money, right? So for the primary metric, it's going to be your main action that drives revenue. So your initial purchase, where your secondary metric are really focused on expansion revenue, those cross-sells and upsells. For the Hotjar example, we looked at, you're really kind of talking about upgrading tiers. They have 3 types of plans, a personal, a business, and agency. For the personal plan, you're trying to go basic to plus. For the business, you're increasing page views per day. This is how they were pricing things. And as an agency, you're looking to get those agencies to add additional clients. Retention, this is engagement, right? So users are coming back to your product, looking to see increased value, and really become engaged or an active customer. So our primary metric here, I've denoted as create a second heat map or create a new heat map. And the secondary metrics here are really going to push or drive people to create those new heat maps. So maybe they view what they're calling click heat maps, so where people are clicking most. Or maybe you look at the scroll heat map, where people are scrolling down, or you add a note, or you share this heat map. All of these things drive engagement, which lead to creating new heat maps, which is the primary metric. Referral. This is pretty self-explanatory. But ultimately, your customers are loving your product. They're turning into brand advocates. They want to share it with your network. So as a primary metric, though, I put here a new referral, however, denoted invitation accepted. So not just being sent, but actually being accepted would become a primary metric, whereas secondary metrics, maybe it's just the act of sending a referral, but it hasn't been accepted yet. Or maybe adding a new team member to your product, or your account, I should say. So let's look at how this all comes together, right? So when you have a visual like this, this becomes ultimately your business's growth metrics that your team now can visualize and understand and get behind. So you can put these together. A lot of these there's a couple secondary in here, there's some primary. It's for you to decide. It's for you to really keep simple and align the team around. But you'll see how you're driving revenue, how you're expanding revenue, how you're creating engagement and getting those people to talk about you. One thing to note about referral, which Dave McClure mentioned, which I thought was something to note, is if your product sucks, don't have people share it with other people. So don't necessarily do that until you're confident or you have product market fit and that your product is actually driving this value. Then move into the referral metric type of avenue. Okay, so next we're going to talk about aligning your teams around these metrics. So we have them defined, and we want to talk about the team. Let's first talk about what team is responsible for growing them. Then we'll talk about assigning a person that can be kind of the owner of that metric to address if it's not growing, what kind of issues you have, where they will be tracked, what strategies will grow them, and what tools we'll use to grow those strategies. But first, let's look at some quick stats here, right? Forrester Research concluded that businesses that with proper alignment actually see a 32% increase in revenue growth, whereas organizations without it or have less alignment actually see 7% decrease in growth. This is basically the difference between success and failure right here. It's pretty simple. Additionally, only 8% of companies say their marketing and sales teams are aligned. That's a tiny percentage. If you add a product team in there, it like drops off the map, I promise. Like sales, marketing teams, and product teams all being aligned will be such a small percentage, it's scary. So what you want to do is determine what teams are responsible for growing these actionable metrics. So you'll look at acquisition, and this might seem simple to some people, but if you have a team of people that are doing different things, they need to understand where this falls in place. And it gets a little more complicated on your business model. So for activation, if you're doing kind of a high touch model versus a low touch model, you might decide is it customer success the function of activation, or is sales, or is it both? So it's really for you guys to decide as a team, but by mapping this out, everyone gets a very clear picture as to what their team's roles are and how they're going to work together to grow these metrics. So then you'll talk about who on the team owns the metric. So my suggestion is to give somebody personal responsibility for growing this metric. Now, they're on a team that's going to have this, help them grow this. But if there becomes an issue when you're tracking this person would bring it to the forefront and say, okay, we have an issue here, let's address it. Then you'll want to define where these metrics will be tracked. Product teams know where theirs are being tracked. Marketing teams know where theirs are being tracked. Sales teams know where theirs are being tracked. But the product teams know where marketing's are being tracked? Usually not. And usually it causes a big problem when you're talking about integrations or understanding the process, the flow of information. So just a quick way of understanding this and aligning it really helps people see this. And then what strategies to grow them? So when acquisition, I've seen all of these, right? And you can start with the high-level inbound marketing, paid, cold outreach, whatever, and you can drill into channels, etc. But activation, here's some other examples, walkthroughs, checklists, in-app messages, etc. I would also note on activation and retention, product updates at the bottom, where if you're pinpointing opportunities here, there probably will be product updates. But you're agreeing as a team on these updates, and you're understanding where they're being edited or changed in order for growth. So next is what tools are needed to grow these strategies. You may track metrics in some of these tools, but they're not the same tools that you need to grow the strategies. So by listing out these tools that you have in your tech stack to grow each of these metrics, you'll easily see which strategies you may not have the proper tool for and the gap in your tech stack. And you'll say, okay, well, we need to figure out how are we going to, we said we're going to grow it this way. What do we need to grow it? Next is tracking your progress. So basically setting up tracking tools to analyze the metrics and hold your team accountable for growing them. So I'm just suggesting creating a tracking dashboard, some scorecards, and we'll kind of run through these. So creating a tracking dashboard, we use something called grow.com. You can use Power BI, you can use Tableau, whatever BI analytics tool you want to automate visualizing these actionable metrics, but basically just help you quickly see trends and identify growth issues, as well as setting up company and team scorecards. So this will just help you hold each other and your teammates accountable for growing these metrics. And we'll get into a little bit of the details here. So what do you do with that? Once you have your dashboard built out, you can then determine baselines on these metrics. So on the left here, I've taken out some of the metrics. Obviously, it's just one from each stage. But you would determine what number of times over what period are we agreeing that this is our baseline. So weekly, 250 free trials, or whatever we're agreeing that is our baseline. And then you just determine your goals, right? You always need a baseline to determine your goals. So we think we can achieve 250. So creating a company scorecard is centered around your primary metrics. So this gives a company like a bird's eye view of how you're growing. So you'll put all your primary metrics, who's responsible in the leadership team for making sure these are growing, the goal direction, do you need to get greater than, equal to, whatever your goal is set, and then determine the period of time. Like this is 1 week, maybe you just have columns that go week to week and see how we're doing, where are we hitting our goals. Then you can get granular with team scorecards. So that's the primary metrics. If you need to look at particularly user onboarding, maybe you need to look at activation metrics. And by doing this, teams can then have their own scorecard. They're accountable for that portion. And whatever teams are responsible now understand who's responsible for that metric, the goal that you're trying to achieve, and then holding each other accountable on that basis. One other important thing and reason to do scorecards is assigning other numbers to teammates. So I suggest your teammates or each person have a number. This might be an example of a customer success or support person where their goal is to answer support tickets in under 1 minute and their number is 1. And so each week, what's the average? This person's 34 seconds. Great, you did it, Larry Bird. So next is identifying growth opportunities. This is where it gets really good. So getting answers to the most important questions around your actionable metrics is how you're going to grow your business. So for example, how many users became paying customers that completed user onboarding that did not? User onboarding being the last step in your activation stage. By doing this, you're going to understand, do we even have user onboarding defined properly? Is there other issues? Are we missing steps, etc.? Or which retention actions when completed is leading to the highest value customers? Or maybe what other actions are highly engaged users doing that others aren't? The goal with your engagement or retention metric, in my opinion, is to find the metric that brings the highest value customer. Once you identify that and it's a customer-driven metric, that can become your North Star metric. It basically is your metric that you want to grow that will determine the growth of your business and the success of healthy growth. This is my shout out. Full disclosure, Intertrends is a partner of ours, but they make it easy to track these actionable metrics and identify the highest growth opportunity without having to be a data scientist. So I haven't really found another product out there that can allow you to do something like this without having tracking everything and making sense of it. So I highly recommend them. They're also a Romanian company, so I would take a look. And then to get you a head start, we created a G Sheet template. If this is of interest to you, you can write this down. It's bit.ly/actionable-metrics-HTW. Yeah, feel free to take a pic. I'll leave it up for a second. And basically what you're going to get here is a G Sheet that breaks this down into 5 columns, has every part that we discussed, so you can align this. It will have another tab with like this Hotjar example already filled out for you. And it will have a company scorecard tab, something that will get you started with scorecards if that's of interest. All right, so it's time to get to work. If you do want help setting up and implementing this, as well as pinpointing your highest growth opportunities, Interact also offers a service we call Managed SaaS Growth Analytics, so you can check that out. Thank you much. Happy to answer questions. You want to use mine?
It would be a bit awkward, right?
Switch it back and forth.
It would be a bit awkward. Okay, so thank you very much. And let's see a couple of the questions from the audience. One would be, what's your advice on showing live metrics on the monitor in the office so that people can see the stats anytime and get excited or worried about them? Is it too stressful?
No, I think it's a great idea. If you had these metrics, just the primary metrics that you agreed on, such as the graphic that we showed with the funnel after we define them, and your engagement and referral metrics, if you're seeing how you're doing for the week, I think that would be motivating. It should be motivating. If you're excited in growing these and setting proper goals, it should be motivating you to grow these. You should not be afraid of them.
I can just imagine those in the war room and see, wow, yay. Okay, great. How about this question? How would you go about introducing the AARRR metrics framework to a team that hasn't used it before and getting their buy-in?
So, I mean, to start, I would just download this template. In that template, there's actually questions to ask. It breaks out questions that for each stage you'll be able to answer. So, it's going to be something that, depending upon who you are, you're the business owner, then you can clearly just say, hey, we're going to do this. If you're a teammate, I would take the template, I would probably fill it out yourself to the best of your ability, answer the questions that are on it, and then take it to your boss and say, hey, check this out. I think this would help our team get aligned.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. For the moment, let's see if another question popped up. No, I think that for the moment we will be done.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A big round of applause.